Support comes from UT's Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, featuring miles of trails and nearly 900 native plant species. More about the official Botanic Garden of Texas at wildflower.org.
If I had $1 for every plant that I killed, I would be a rich woman. I mean, it's part of what happens even to everyone that grows plants, even people that quote unquote know how to grow plants. They don't succeed always. But if it's doing great, tell me how great it's doing. When our sons were younger, Jim, we had a standard home in town and had a small lot, and we always felt like we wanted a bigger property. So we started looking and we found this particular house, and the view was amazing and the yard was nice and big and the price was right, so we decided to move. And we've been in this house 36 years. And this has been a real gradation of changes over the years. First, for things for our sons to do, swing sets, this, that, and the other. But I've always gardened here. And I gardened at my other house. I gardened when I was a little kid with my dad. And so it's just part of what I do. I've made a lot of friends because of gardening. A lot of these plants are plants I've had 30 plus years, and some of them, like the staghorn ferns, I had when we moved here. A lot of them are plants that I've traded either with my mom or with my sisters. We're all big into plants, and so they have a lot of history. In fact, some of these plants came from my grandmother. Rabbitfoot ferns are very interesting because you can see they look like they have little toes, little rabbit toes. This one was my mom's. I started for her, and then when she passed, it came back to my house. A lot of the ways that things are situated on the deck have to do with their preference in terms of light, in terms of, you know, how much exposure they get per day, and I move them around to a certain extent based on the time of year it is. So in the winter, the majority of the plants that are on the deck go down to the greenhouse, but the really large ones that are hard for us to handle have to stay up here. We use a block and tackle to get the large staghorn fern down and across to this hook here, and then we take a big tarp that we have left over from our 16-foot catamaran that we used to have, and rope it around the top through loops and make a tent out of it, and then put a small electric heater underneath to overwinter them. And the geckos love them. In the spring when we open it up, they're all in there and they just like explode out. When I was about to retire, my dad was very ill, and so I retired to help him, and he passed away and he left me a little money. And he told me he wanted me to use it for something for me. And so I decided that I wanted to redesign my garden for me, because I'm hoping to be able to just garden as long as I can. So, you know, I wanted to add things that would make that easier for me as I aged. Initially, I had a stonemason come in and build the base walls for my garden, which surrounded the original garden. It squared it up a little bit, but it's basically the same area. And when we did that, I planned out my water sources, because water is quite expensive out here. And so we put in soil, a lot of soil, on top of my really good soil to make it level. And within that, we put in the piping and the infrastructure that went to all of the faucets that go within the garden, and each one of them operates a specific bed. At the base of the stone wall, there's a control, a valve that you can open, that when you turn the water off up here at the house, which is where it originates, then it'll drain the entire garden, all of the lines in the garden, which means that, you know, you won't get freezing. And I also have a couple of just drainage lines that go through the soil itself in case we have a large amount of rain, so it doesn't like capture and make a swimming pool. There's a super heavy duty weed block that's on top of the soil. Then the bottoms were cut out of the beds after we had the beds built, so that if the plants wanted to go all the way down to the original soil that was in the garden, that can happen too. I designed them with an edge that I could actually sit on to like weed or plant. I made my spaces between all of the beds large enough to move a wheelbarrow through, or to use a walker with, or to even use with a wheelchair. So then we put the soil all in, which was a challenge. I think we put more than 13 yards. I'm pretty sure you'll have to ask Jim about that. He did most of that. It was 30 yards. But he did get to rent a neat little front end loader, so that was kind of a fun aspect. And then we had him construct the exterior.
The yard is fenced against deer, but on 3 sides they installed cattle panel at waist height to keep out frisky dogs. At the back, they took it to the top for climbing plants.
A lot of times I plant flowers because I really like to have some flowers in my garden. And I have sweet peas in there now. Then I usually put green beans of one type or another. I usually grow something interesting or ornamental. Last year I grew dinosaur gourds, which have these really gnarly growths on them. That was very interesting.
A lattice pergola formalizes the entrance. Rather than a hinged gate, they picked a sliding barn door.
So now it's really easy, even with your elbow or whatever you want, to just scoot it out of the way to open and close. And it makes it easy for kids too, if they want to go in and out and pick things. I had the panel, I bought the panel, the metal panel that's in the door, because I knew I wanted something decorative. So there's a real range of drip lines within my garden. Each one is individually regulated by the faucets that are in front of each one of the beds. And each one of those faucets have 2 other controls on them that do either side. And then each one of the individual lines have valves on them that I can shut off. I knew I wanted to do some things like lettuce and things like that that needed the little drip emitters that were like the 6-inch emitters. Then I have some that are on a 12-inch emitter that are things like some of the squashes, things like that that are further apart. And then there are some that have the 1 to 2 gallon drippers, which are the individual plants like the peppers and like the tomatoes. I have row cover on quite a bit of what I grow, actually most of the time, even in spring when their plants are small, because I'd rather have insect avoidance. I don't want to spray insecticides. I don't use things like that in my garden. So being able to just keep them from getting on it is so much easier. And it also regulates the temperature, not only of the soil, but the air. So it really benefits the small plants when they start growing to have that continuity of temperatures, not too hot in the day, hopefully, not too cool in the evening. I'd used the micro mesh last fall, and I also used it this spring on my squash plants, and it worked really well until I had to take it off when they started blooming. And then eventually the squash vine borers actually still did get into my squash, but I got some good production before they did, not like usual where just as they started to put squash on, all of a sudden one day they're all dead. Being able to just put a barrier there, I think is, and you can see through it, it's easy to see what's going on. I do have thermometers down there. I have thermometers. I have a thermometer that goes to my kitchen that has a monitor on it. It has one, I have one on the deck, I have one on the garden, and I have one in my greenhouse. So I can keep track of the temperatures, all those different places and tell, when things are really changing fast or not. It also has an alarm that I can set.
Over the years, Peggy's germinated new gardeners of all ages by passing along cuttings, seedlings, knowledge, and passion.
When my children were in school, I used to do science things with some of the classrooms. I actually designed all of the landscaping for Patton Elementary and had a whole crew of moms mainly that put it in and maintained it while my kids were in school there, and worked up a manual for the maintenance and use of it, with what different things were for and how to use them. And we put up some Martin houses. My son did that for his Eagle Scout project. I think that connecting with the natural world is a really important thing for all generations to do, because it's one thing we have in common, and there's no way that you live without it.